headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. We begin today's show with a look at the extreme weather affecting large areas of the United States. Massive forest fires, heat waves and droughts are devastating much of the country. This comes just a week after Tropical Storm Debbie flooded Florida. But amidst the news coverage of the extreme weather, we rarely hear two other words: global warming. This is just a sampling of recent news reports.
The heat wave that's baked the Rockies and the Great Plains now spreading east. There are 113 million Americans now in the excessive heat advisory zone. That's more than a third of the entire U.S. population.
The high today here in Indianapolis, a sizzling 103 degrees. That broke a 78-year-old record. Nashville broke its all-time record, hitting 109 degrees. Authorities urged people to stay indoors and canceled outdoor events this weekend. From Atlanta,
smoking out here,
to Chicago.
I'm going to bring a towel soaked in ice and a bucket with ice and try to keep cool.
The U.S. National Guard is helping police in Colorado Springs in the wake of the most destructive wildfires in the state's history. Those fires have forced thousands of people to flee their homes.
The fast-moving fires in Colorado have destroyed hundreds of homes and are threatening thousands more. The fires have grown so large you can see it from space. Take a look at this video from the International Space Station. It shows the area scorched by flames in the western states so far.
It's getting quite dangerous for some people, very old and the very young especially. There's an excessive heat watch, which is basically an official way of telling you what we've been telling you for a long time. The rest of this week, lots and lots of excessive heat.
Plenty of extreme weather coverage, but no mention of the role played by climate change and global warming. This comes as a relentless heat wave is now gripping the eastern United States for a fifth straight day. More than 2,000 heat records have been broken over the past week. Thousands more were set in June. Even more striking, the first day of July also broke records for the highest ever recorded temperatures on any date at spots in Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, and South Carolina.
Meanwhile, a violent thunderstorm known as a derecho left a more than 700-mile trail of destruction across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic Friday, cutting power to millions, killing at least 23 people. And all of this comes as firefighters in Colorado grapple with the two most destructive wildfires in Colorado's history. The fires spread a haze of smoke over urban areas, displaced tens of thousands of people. They left behind vast swaths of blackened forests and burned to the ground more than 600 homes. This is 76-year-old Colorado Springs resident Damon Bolin after seeing the remains of his house.
It's just, it's heart-wrenching, rather sickening. I don't think we ever had a fear of being harmed by the fire, but when you all of a sudden realize you've lost your entire life, the thing you've been working for all of your life, and the beauty and the tranquility that we have been experiencing for the past several years, and realize now there's no house, there's no place you can call home.
Well, for more, we're joined by the Guardian newspaper's environmental correspondent, Suzanne Goldenberg, who's just returned from reporting in the fires in Colorado. She's joining us from Washington, where her own home just regained power this morning after Friday's storm. And we're joined in Ann Arbor, Michigan, by Jeff Masters, director of meteorology at the Weather Underground website. Here in New York, Christian Parenti is with us, professor of sustainable development at the School for International Training in Vermont, and the author of several books, most recently Tropic of Chaos: Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence. Susan Goldenberg, let's begin with you. You're just back from Colorado. Describe what's happening there.
Well, it's just huge destruction on a scale that they haven't seen before in Colorado. What makes this wildfire different from other wildfires that we've seen really is the number of houses burnt and the fact that they burnt within city limits. These are not forests far away, remote from people. These are city limits, and within city limits, and lots of people were affected. This particular fire also was described by firefighters across the board as extremely unpredictable. There was a moment in the middle of last week where the city's mayor was giving a press conference. He was talking about how they thought they had things under control. And then as he spoke on camera, right behind him, this huge ball of fire burst out and came racing down the mountain and towards his home. So this was a fire of a ferocity that hasn't been seen before.
Is this what you would characterize as what some people are calling supersized fires?
That one's a bit hard to say exactly. I mean, when you talk to forest scientists and fire scientists, they have a number of criteria in terms of numbers of acres that are burnt, damage caused, and how severe the burning was. And they haven't gotten in there to the area yet to know how severe the damage was, whether things were burnt to the ground in the forest. They certainly were in homes. You've seen picture after picture of homes burnt down to their cement foundations. In terms of area, it's not in the hundreds and thousands of acres we've seen in the other fires. In terms of its effects, it's certainly devastating enough to rank as a super fire, but I don't know if it fits, if it ticks all the boxes that would need to be ticked.
Suzanne Goldenberg, the relationship between the fires in Colorado, the drenching rain in Florida, the massive heat wave that we're seeing across the country. I mean, often things don't look like they are connected, but this issue of global warming started in Colorado.
Absolutely, climate change is a big factor here. We've had a 10-year or more drought across the West. You haven't had rain, and when you have had rain, it hasn't come at the right time or in the right quantity. Crucially, you haven't had snow. You've had really mild winters. So there isn't that big snowpack in the mountains whose gradual runoff would sort of feed the forests and the fields, give people the water they need. What you've got now across a lot of the Southwest is a situation where any tiny spark from a cigarette, from a chainsaw, from a car parked too close to high grass, any tiny spark is given up to possibly 100% probability of starting a fire. It's that dry, and that's an effect of climate change.
I'd like to bring in Jeff Masters and ask, Jeff Masters, can you explain what you think accounts for the record heat and violent storms that we're now witnessing?
You've got two things to think about here. One is the fact that the atmosphere has natural ups and downs, and this year happens to be one of those years when we're getting, say, a 1 in 20 year type of heat wave, which, happen about once every 20 years. But on top of that, you've got this background pattern of global warming. So now you've increased the odds of getting these 1 in 20 type year heat waves. And the expectation is by the end of the century, this kind of heat wave is going to occur once every 2 years. So no surprise here, a warming climate, you have a higher probability of getting hot summers like we're seeing this year.
We're going to go to break, then come back to this discussion. Play a clip of Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, who was at the Climate Change Summit in Copenhagen, and we had a chance to interview him. And we'll discuss what's happening not only in the United States, but around the world, as we put together the two words extreme weather with another two, climate change, climate disruption, global warming. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.